All right. Hello, 7th grade. I am Mr. Rogers.
And I'm Mrs. Froman.
And you are watching the video lecture for section 2-2, and this is on bacteria. So our first actual real living things, I guess we would say, we're studying this year.
Yes.
And bacteria cells, all of them, are prokaryotes or prokaryotic. And I always kind of have it underlined or spotted there. Pro means no, so they do not have a nucleus. Their DNA kind of floats around in their cytoplasm. There's no defined space for the nucleus. And they come in three major shapes. We have spherical, rod, or spiral, also known as cocci, bacilli, and spirilla. So we'll look more at those in the next few days. And look at these types individually under the microscope too, if we can.
All right, the bacteria cell structures. They don't have a whole lot. They do have a cell wall, which is kind of rigid, and that's mainly for protection. Inside they have a cytoplasm, just like a regular cell. They have ribosomes to produce their proteins, and they have their genetic material, their DNA, and that's just, as you said, floating around in the cytoplasm. And then some of them have something called a flagellum, which is a whip-like structure that comes from the cell membrane and sticks out of the bacteria. And it can help with movement, but not all the bacteria have it.
But some do help move around. Okay.
Right. So as far as organelles, not much. Just
pretty
ribosomes
simplistic.
is pretty much the only one.
That's probably why there's so numerous, though, too, and there's so many of them out there in different types, because they keep it simple. That's the biggest thing.
Exactly.
All right, so on this picture, guys, we do want you to put this in your notes. It's one of those auditory ones. I'm not going to write it on here. I'm just going to make sure you guys have listened and put it on there. So here are all these parts we just talked about. The outermost part, there's that cell wall. So unlike our cells, they do have cell walls. And the inner layer then is the cell membrane. Allows things to pass in and out. And there's these flagella. Some might have one flagellum. Some might have many. Just kind of depends on the species. One, many, or even none. And again, floating around the inside, here's that DNA, that genetic material. It's going to be floating around. It's not in a nucleus. And the other major organelle they have is ribosomes, because they're very good at making proteins. It's what they do. It's how they break down food with proteins or these sometimes toxins that will break down food so they can digest them. So they have a lot of ribosomes because they make a lot of proteins that will help them digest food.
Then we have two types of bacteria, and they actually each have their own kingdom now. The archaebacteria, and those are the really ancient ones. They live in really extreme conditions, like really high salt content, high temperature, high sulfur content, like around the volcanic vents in the ocean and stuff.
Or even deep down in my gut, too. There's some down there.
Yeah, really intense, extreme conditions, And then the eubacteria, those are the ones we think of more when we think of bacteria. They're just the ones laying on the desk on your outside your skin. A lot of them are helpful. We can't think of them as being bad because we really need a lot of them. And they help maintain the living conditions on Earth.
Yeah, I would think the bacteria, by and large, are good for us, and they kind of get really a bad rap.
Yeah.
Just a few
there's
bad
a few
apples.
that are bad and make you sick, but
most of them are good.
Yeah.
So in bacteria, again, they're very simplistic in their design, but they're very good at reproducing. Obviously, they're everywhere. And there's two major ways. One is through asexual reproduction. That means there's one parent, and it's called binary fission. And so we have one cell just divides and duplicates into two. So each cell is going to have the same DNA. As that cell grows and divides, the DNA stays the same. That's kind of the biggest thing.
Kind of familiar.
Kind of like mitosis, I believe. But
like
so
mitosis,
that one cell divides into two, and that DNA, though, isn't changing. It's one cell copying the DNA and making that DNA.
All right, and then there is sexual reproduction in the bacteria, and then we have two parents that are combining their genetic material, and that's called conjugation. And one bacteria will transfer some of its genetic material into the other bacteria, and then the cells will separate. So it actually makes a little bridge across the two bacteria. It's like a tube, and the DNA just goes through there. It doesn't increase the number of bacteria at all, but it makes them genetically different. So we're kind of just trading DNA.
Okay. And I was telling you before, I recently read that a certain type of bacteria called cholera actually will jet out harpoons, little tiny harpoons, into a neighboring bacteria.
Yeah.
And it makes it cough up its DNA, so it takes it. So
so that's
another way of recombining the DNA, because it's taking, I guess, more by force than anything else.
So obviously they know that they need some different DNA, because having the same all the time isn't good. So.
They got to remix and shuffle that deck.
Yeah.
So what do they need to survive? So they need food, and some of them are autotrophs, means they can make their own food. Some of them are heterotrophs, that means they have to consume food. And depending where they are, it kind of depends what they do. But some will carry out respiration, the process of breaking down food for energy. And this may or may not use oxygen. This is where I think kids get confused a lot, is we think every living thing needs oxygen, which isn't true.
Right.
Many bacteria will die in the presence of oxygen. The first living things on Earth were thought to be bacteria, and that was before our atmosphere was oxygenated, so there wasn't any air in our oxygen or oxygen in our atmosphere. There we go.
Yeah, but we did have bacteria.
But we had bacteria, so they're anaerobic bacteria. That means they can live without any oxygen. And some do need oxygen, of course, too.
Those are called aerobic.
Aerobic and anaerobic.
Now, one thing that bacteria have to help them survive, they can make an endospore. And that's a small, that should be thick-walled resting cell inside the bacteria, and it contains the genetic material and some of the cytoplasm. So what happens is, let's just say you have strep throat, which is caused by a bacteria, and you cough on the desk, and you leave, and that little guy can't survive on the desk. So he will take that bacteria, the bacterial DNA, put a little thick cell or cell wall around it. So if he dries out, he's still going to be able to stay alive because his DNA is protected.
Inside there,
but then if somebody else comes along and puts their hand on there and sticks their hand in their mouth or doesn't wash their hands before they go to lunch, in he goes, nice little warm, moist area for him. That spore coat will then disintegrate and he'll become a little bacteria to make you sick again.
Oh, he's clever.
Yes.
So what are they good for? Why do we need bacteria? Well, we think about even millions and billions of years ago. 20% of our natural gas was produced by dead anaerobic bacteria from millions of years ago that, again, were pressed down in those swamps and those bogs. And over time, have converted into natural gas.
And that tells you there had to be a lot of bacteria.
A lot of bacteria,
there's a lot of natural gas we're still getting.
We're just that's a new kind of thing. We're just untapping some of those resources. Many of them help us make food. They help to help pickles ferment different foods, make different types of cheeses, yogurt. Apple cider is really actually fermented from bacteria, so it's real stuff. But some do spoil food. That's kind of what they can be too much there. They're known as recyclers. They're one of the major decomposers in most ecosystems.
Yeah, we really need them.
Yeah. And as far as even like environmental cleanup, some actually you can spray a solution of foam on certain oil spills with bacteria in there, and they'll actually kind of degrade and break down that oil. So there's a lot of good that they do. There's a couple of those bad guys always when they give us the bad rap there.
And as far as your health goes with bacteria, as Mr. Rogers said, you have bacteria in your gut. They help you digest your food. You have bacteria that are actually making vitamins for your body, so that helps you keep healthy. You have bacteria that will actually fight off the harmful bacteria because they have a nice little spot living in your body. They don't want any
messing with that,
bad bacteria coming in. And we can also use bacteria to engineer to produce medicine. When we did the
making insulin. Using different bacteria for that. Yeah, and the more we learn more and more every day about how the bacteria in our gut is really good for us. Now they say there's more almost for every cell you have a bacteria cell in your gut there, so it's almost equal numbers. There's so many in our gut. They can affect your health and even like your attitude and personality because they can affect your health in so many different ways. So very important inside of us. All right, so 7th grade, we're going to stop there. We thank you for watching, and we'll see you along the way.
Bye. All right.